Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. Jim Rickards, in his book The New Case for Gold, said that gold doesn't have risk and doesn't have a return, and is not supposed to have either a risk or a return, because it's money. He's correct in the sense that he is rebutting the criticism that gold does not have a return, right? Like anti-gold people are like, gold doesn't have a return. Well, yeah, he's right in saying that, yeah, well, it's not supposed to. It's money. Just like dollars don't have a return either. They're not supposed to. They're money. Well, technically currency, but you get my point. You cannot eat dollars either. Just like they always say, oh, you can't eat gold. Well, yeah, you can't eat dollars either, but you can turn dollars in for food and you can eat the food. Or you can turn gold in for dollars and then use the dollars to buy food. You know what I mean? So those are retarded arguments against gold. Dollars only ever return if you invest them. If you keep them in a safe at home, they have no yield. They don't make you any money. Dollars don't go up in value just by holding them. You got to put them at risk by putting them in a bank, and putting your money in a bank is a risk. You're an unsecured creditor, which means you're the last one who's going to get repaid if the bank goes down or whatever. And you may take a haircut if you have more than $250,000 and therefore are not insured by the FDIC. You're going to lose your money, or your money is whatever. Like, they can literally steal your money. Bail-in has been the law in America since, I think, 1934 or something, said Jim Rickards. So, dollars don't have a return, but neither does gold. But actually, gold does have a return, which I'm going to talk about later. You can earn a return on your dollars, but only by putting them at risk. Putting them in a bank, buying stock with them, buying bonds with them, whatever. And yeah, bonds are a risk. If the government gets overthrown or utterly collapses, then yeah, those bonds might not be honored at all. They might become utterly worthless. But you can actually get a return from gold as well. Like, you can get a return from dollars by investing them in stocks or bonds or putting them in a bank, which is a risk. But you can also get a return from gold as well. If you have enough gold, if you have a lot of gold, like you're very, very rich, like a billionaire, you can do the bullion bank thing and loan your gold out and get your gold back with interest, which is basically the same thing as putting your dollars in a bank and getting paid interest for doing so. That's putting your gold at risk, because you might not get your gold back. But if you do get your gold back, you get the same amount back and you get money. You get paid for doing that, right? So, gold can be loaned out just like dollars can, and can earn a return by doing so, but you're putting it at risk, right? But that doesn't even take account of the fact that gold goes up in value over time, and therefore gold actually does have a yield. If you hold it for long enough, it has a 2.5% yield per year. That's pretty good. That's above inflation. Like 5% inflation, gold has a 2.5% yield above inflation, meaning in a 5% inflation environment, that's a 7.5% return every year on average over a several decade period. That's why you're able to earn interest. But back to what I was saying, that's you're putting your gold at risk because you might not get the gold back if you do the bullion thing, right? That bullion bank thing, by loaning it out to get it back for money. That's why you were able to earn interest on loaning the gold, because you're putting the gold at risk. There's almost no such thing as getting a return while taking zero risk. But there are varying levels of risk and return. People usually think of risk and reward as being paired together. That is, things which are low risk are low reward, and things which are high risk are high reward. But some things are things are things that you can take a small risk on and potentially make a big return. Those are the best. And the higher your intelligence is, the more you can find and intelligently make use of those opportunities using things like derivatives, like options, calls and puts and stuff like that, in order to make a lot of money while taking very little risk. Intelligence is the main way to make a lot of money, but of course it needs to always be understood that high IQ without a good memory is not much use. And you need to have a great, or at least good memory, along with having a high IQ. Then you can make a lot of money and accrue power and therefore freedom, both for yourself and for your children and your descendants. By doing eugenic breeding, using a second woman whose kids are created by using sperm from a guy like Altmigtar Yanling, who has a very good IQ, very high IQ, very good memory, and very good health, and then giving that sperm to the woman, the ugly but smart woman, so that she can get pregnant with it and therefore have high IQ kids that you can marry your kids off to, so that your grandkids have much better IQs and better health as well, higher health, higher libidos and everything. By doing this, you can make sure that your grandkids make a lot more money than you and your kids do. That way your grandkids can make a lot of money for their kids and grandkids, which are your great-grandkids and great-great-grandkids. And your grandkids can buy silver and gold and then pass it down to your great-grandkids and great-great-grandkids. And then if those great-grandkids and great-great-grandkids hold on to that silver and gold and pass it down to their descendants so that it's not sold for a couple hundred years, all while building even more of an amassment of gold and silver to pass down to their kids, because each couple probably has 3 to 5 kids in the commune, right? Well, then, the silver or gold, 100, 200 years later, will have massively increased in purchasing power, and then your descendants will have literally gotten rich for free, basically, because most of that accruement in purchasing power was just due to the appreciation of sound money that happens automatically. And so all of that increase in purchasing power will be for free. Sure, they will have paid a little bit for the gold and silver, but not compared to how much it went up in value over a 100 to 200 year period, right? Just by inheriting that gold or silver, which is massively increased in value, they will have gotten rich, for free. In 200 years, silver could go from being worth $20 today, an ounce today, to being worth literally $1 million an ounce. No joke. The real price of silver today is probably at least $10,000 an ounce. And the appreciation of silver is, and even though the appreciation of silver is less than gold's 2.5% per year, over a few centuries, silver's increasing rarity and increasing demand, that will make it so that silver will eventually be going up even more than gold is going up. Silver will probably be going up 3, 5, maybe 10% a year because of it becoming so rare, because of so much of it being destroyed every year in industry, permanently destroyed. So then gold will start to become really abundant compared to silver. Silver will become really rare compared to gold. Maybe not in the Earth's crust, but like compared to above ground stores and how much silver is available compared to how much is needed for industry. They'll probably eventually outlaw silver because they'll need all of it for industry, and they still won't have enough for all the computers and all the other things they need silver for, because they'll be getting less and less out of the ground eventually. But yet they need more of it than ever before for the high-tech society we'll be living in 100 to 200 years. You see, so then silver will be a way better investment than gold if your descendants hold it for a couple hundred years. And gold, if I remember correctly, goes up by a factor of 10 every century, meaning if you have $100,000 worth of gold today and you hold it for 100 years, it'll be worth $1 million in a century. And that's assuming it never skyrockets. That's assuming that the price suppression stays in place and they keep it barely above the mining cost for the next 100 years. It'll still go up by a factor of 10, but if it skyrockets because of a government collapse or something, then it'll go up even more. It'll probably go up 100 or 1,000 times in purchasing power. So if silver's value increases as much as gold's on average over 2 centuries, then silver could be worth 100 times more than it's worth today, because the first century it'll increase by 10 times, and then in the next century it'll increase another 10 times. So 10 times 10 is 100. So your silver could be worth 100 times what it is worth today, even without the price suppression breaking, if you hold it for 2 centuries. Today's true price of silver should be $10,000 an ounce. So times 100, you get $1 million per ounce. So you could get $1 million per ounce silver if the price suppression breaks and you hold it for 200 years, right? But even, and that's assuming it only goes up to 10,000 an ounce. I think it could go way higher than that. It would not surprise me if silver were $50,000 or $100,000 an ounce if the government completely collapsed. But even if you think that silver will never skyrocket to 10,000, then just take today's price of $20 an ounce and multiply it by 100. That's a price of $2,000 an ounce. That is so much money. That is a lot of money if you pass a lot of ounces down to your descendants. You know what I mean? Did I say it would be $1 million, even if it, if the price suppression were not broken? I guess I was wrong about that. It would be $2,000 an ounce if the price suppression were never broken in 2,000 years. But that's $2,000 in today's purchasing power, not in inflated, worthless $2,000 in the future. I'm saying what you can buy today for $2,000, you'll be able to buy in 100 or 200 years, you'll be able to buy with 1 ounce of silver at the very least what you can buy today with $2,000. That is, an ounce of silver, even if the price, especially if the price suppression continues and never stops, and they keep the price of silver barely above the cost it takes to mine it, you will still be able to buy a computer with 1 ounce of silver, right? That is a lot of money if you pass a lot of ounces down to your descendants. Like you pass down 1,000 ounces down to each descendant. Like you have 2 kids and you give them each 1,000 ounces. And then they save a bunch of ounces of silver during their life, and they each have 2 kids, and they each pass 1,000 ounces down to their 2 kids. And so on and so on and so on. If it goes down like that for 200 years, you know, and the silver hoard just keeps getting bigger and bigger, but they keep having more and more kids, so the same amount of silver is being saved per person. You know, each kid is inheriting the same amount of silver as his father did. Well, then that's like, you know, that could be a ton of money. You know what I mean? Like 1,000 ounces of silver at 2,000 ounces, at $2,000 of purchasing power per ounce in 200 years. That means in 200,000 years, each kid, by just inheriting 1,000 ounces, will be inheriting the equivalent of, no, that's not 200,000 bucks. That's 2 million bucks, isn't it? Because, you know, 1,000 ounces in today's purchasing price would be $20,000. Yeah, 1,000 ounces would be $20,000 in today's purchasing power. So multiply 20,000 by 100, you get 2 million. So yeah, that'd be each kid, by inheriting 1,000 ounces, even though the price is still of silver is incredibly suppressed still, and nothing has changed. There's been no huge skyrocket or anything. There's been no government collapse. Well, if that's the case in 200 years, the 1,000 ounces will be worth $2 million in today's purchasing power. That's enough to help you buy a house, or, you know, more than just help you buy a house. That's enough to buy you a couple of houses. You know what I mean? 3 or 4 houses. You might have to, or whatever. You know that, and enough to probably start a business too. You know, you buy maybe a house. Maybe you buy another duplex and you rent it out for passive income, and then you spend the rest on starting up a business, and then, you know, you make a bunch of money that way. Like, your descendants will all be set for life if they all inherit 1,000 ounces. I mean, for real, that's so much money. That's ridiculous. And when I say $2 million, I mean $2 million in today's money. What you can buy with $2 million today. That's how much, you know, 1,000 ounces of silver will be worth if the price suppression continues 200 years into the future and your descendants inherit 1,000 ounces each. You know, each one of them will inherit the equivalent of $2 million in purchasing power in today's purchasing power, you know. But I did want to say that while Jim Rickards was basically right, he was technically wrong, because gold does have risk. It's quite volatile in price, and the only way to avoid that volatility is to hold gold for a very long time, such as 40 years or longer, or to ride the wealth cycles. But that's kind of risky too. When you ride the wealth cycle, you take advantage of the wealth cycle, like Mike Maloney talks about it. He recently put out a video just in the last few days about it. You should watch it. It's a good video. I think it has the title Wealth Cycle. I think it has the words wealth cycle in the title. So, you know, go to his videos, look at his recent last 7 videos or so, and then the one that has wealth cycle in the title, watch that video. I think it's only like, you know, 10 to 15 minutes long. And in it, he talks about something which is something he's talked about before, but it's something that you really, really need to know if you don't know about it yet. Which is, you know, gold and other things like real estate and stocks go in cycles opposite to each other. So you don't want to hold gold through all the cycles. You want to hold it till it gets to its peak. Then you sell it, and when gold is at its peak, other things like real estate and stuff and stocks will be at their bottom. You know, they'll be their cheapest. And then you buy stocks or real estate or whatever with the gold, and then you wait for the real estate or the stocks to rise over the next 10 or 20 or 30 years. And then when they're at their peak, then you sell them, and then you rebuy back the gold, and then you can buy even more gold. You see, because the gold will be at its lowest price, or at least relative. I mean, it goes up and down, and over that, it's still going up the whole time. But like, it'll be in terms of those cycles, it'll be at a low point. Gold will be. So you'll probably be able to buy, and since the stocks and real estate are overpriced at that time when you sell, you'll be able to get a lot more gold than when you sold your gold. So you can just increase the amount of stocks, real estate that you have, or gold, if you want to view it in that terms, just by cycling through this cycle. Selling gold, buying real estate or stocks. Then a little while later, a few years later, selling real estate or stocks, buying more gold. And then a few more years later, selling the gold again, and then buying real estate and stocks again. You just keep doing that back and forth over like a 100-year period. He showed in the video, you can just accrue an astronomical amount of wealth doing that. So, you know, you can, like I said, you can just either hold the gold for a long, long time to avoid the volatility, to make up for the volatility rather, or you can just ride the wealth cycles and get a lot richer doing that. So, you know, but that's not risk-free. But holding it is risk-free, but it's not risk-free while you're holding it, because it takes a few decades before gold, on average, goes up enough to have made it a totally risk-free move. You see, so gold is risky because of its volatility. But again, the volatility is not gold's fault, it's the dollar's fault. It's government's fault for government suppressing the price and making us use fiat currency and stuff. So that's actually not a fault of gold, it's just a fault of gold under a statist tyrannical system, right? When that's using fiat currency and suppressing the price of gold and all that, right? So it's not actually gold's fault. But since we have to deal with that the way it is now, it may as well be gold's fault, you know? But it's not a reason to not buy gold. You know, gold's purchasing power was incredibly stable before the Federal Reserve came into existence. Gold's instability in purchasing power only exists because of it being priced in dollar terms and gold being manipulated to prop up the dollar, and the dollar also being volatile, even though over the long term the dollar always goes down in purchasing power. Even though over the long term the dollar only goes down in purchasing power, just like how over the long term gold always goes up in purchasing power. Right? Like the dollar is less volatile, but it's always going down. Gold is more volatile, but it's always gradually over the decades going up, especially if you're looking at gold over like a 40-year period or longer. So yeah, gold is not risk-free except over the long term. And gold is also not free of return because it goes up in purchasing power more than inflation every year on average when averaged over a period of decades, like 40 years, as I've said before in previous videos. So gold does have a return. Gold's return is like 2.5% per year, as Belang P showed in one of his videos. I can't remember which video it was. Assuming that you hold gold for long enough, it does have a return. And gold does have a risk, which is that it's volatile in price. But again, this risk can also be avoided by keeping some of your money in cash. That way, if you ever have an emergency, if you make enough money and you have enough cash savings, you never have to dip into your gold. You never have to sell your gold. You know, you just dip into your cash in emergencies. So really, gold really has little or no risk. Basically zero risk. And it does have a reward. But it does have the inconvenience or so-called risk of, you know, being volatile, and that is a risk for people who don't have enough money to have a large cash holding to where they never have to dip into their gold. If you ever have to dip into your gold, then yes, gold for you does have a risk. So gold does have a risk and does have a return. So Jim Rickards is incorrect in saying that gold does not have a risk or a return. It has both a risk and a return, but the risk is avoidable and the return is a good thing. It's a good thing that it has a return. Dollars don't have a return because it's good that it has a return because unlike everything else basically, other than silver and maybe, you know, platinum, palladium, or rhodium, gold can be, the return of gold can be obtained without taking a risk. You know, the risk of gold is a different risk. It's not the same risk as everything else, you know, and the return is a risk-free return. Kind of the opposite of like bonds in a zero interest rate environment where they're return-free risk, as you know, Rick Rule quoted another guy as saying, you know, return-free risk is insanity. You may as well just hold your dollars in a safe at home. Why would you hold a bond that loses value every year? That's insane. You know what I mean? Well, gold is the opposite of that. It's a return without any risk. At least not risk for holding it. The only risk is if you hold it not long enough and you sell it, and then, you know, the volatility makes it so you lose money. But as long as you're holding it, it is zero risk, basically, if you hold it for long enough and you're getting a return the whole time. You know, so gold is all upside and no downside, basically. Another thing I want to say in this video is that we should vote with our dollars. Knowledge is power. Information is another way of saying information is power. The elites always use ignorance as a weapon against us. They refuse to inform us of what we should be informed about. And if YouTube eventually starts locking down gold and silver channels, censoring them, outright banning them, well, then it's important to have other sources of information. So it's important to keep people like Mike Maloney well-funded so that he can continue to educate the public for free. You know, maybe on BitChute or wherever else, but he's still, you know, educating people. You need to keep people like him well-funded so that he keeps educating people. Because people like him existing are really, really important to the cause of freedom. You know, if you don't buy his gold or silver rounds, then you're not funded, because he has a company that sells gold and silver rounds. And again, he didn't do it to make money and get rich. He did it because he wanted to put the information out there, and he couldn't afford to. He couldn't afford to make you know, little documentaries like he wanted to make. So he started the company to make money so that he could afford to do these educational videos, which he makes, called the Hidden Series of Money videos. But the Hidden Secrets of Money. That's what the series is called. But he also makes a bunch of other videos that are not professionally produced like that, where he just talks about gold and silver and stuff, and those are also really good too. But if you don't buy his gold or silver rounds ever from his company, then you're not funding him. And then if you're not funding him, then he's less able to produce as many educational videos for people. And even now, when he's giving people a lot of important data-driven information on his channel, he still gives more information only to members, people who have bought gold and silver from him. Probably only people who have bought a fair amount, like let's say 100 ounces of silver or more, right? But that information, which he only gives to people who buy his gold and silver rounds from his company, he might start giving even that information away for free if more people start buying their gold and silver from him, and he's thus making a lot more money. So he can thus afford to make more of these expensive educational videos like the Hidden Secrets of Money videos. right? When people have a lot of money, they have a lot of free time also. And when they have a lot of free time, they can make more educational videos. And when they're making good money, people have a buffer. And when people have a buffer, they can be more generous. They don't have to be stingy with information, but can give away everything, all their information for free in order to benefit as many people as possible. You know, this allows us to benefit from that one person's far above average intelligence. Like Mike Maloney's far above average intelligence. He's really good at remembering charts. And so he shows a lot of charts that prove what he's talking about, right? So by buying our gold or silver from Mike Maloney's company, we can fund him and thus fund his educational videos. Fund him to create more hidden secrets of money videos, and thus help ourselves and everyone else make more money for free, as Mike Maloney tells us exactly what to do and when to do it. Even if he's not making more hidden secrets of money videos, he'd have free time, more free time if he's richer because of more of us buying silver from him or gold from him. Then this means that he can spend more time making more videos and give away more information for free and tell everybody right exactly when to sell their gold or silver and not keep that information for only his members. And then everybody gets to sell their stocks or bonds or gold at the exact right time and make a ton of money and ride the wealth cycle almost risk-free because they don't have to figure it out themselves. Mike Maloney's just telling them when to do it so that even an idiot could do it. You know what I mean? And so you get to ride the wealth cycles and get way, way richer, right? All just from like everybody doing the principled, virtuous thing and buying Mike Maloney's overpriced rounds. And yeah, they are a little overpriced, but so what? Like if you only buy his rounds once a month and you spend all the other months of the year buying, the cheaper rounds, well then you're helping him, but at the same time you're still not spending all that much more money than you usually would. You're still buying most of your silver and gold cheap, and you're only buying a few overpriced rounds from him every year. But, if everybody did that, every little bit adds up. And then he's making way more money, and then he's got way more time and way more money to spend educating people. You see, so we really need to do the right, wise, principled thing and do things like buy rounds from Mike Maloney, even though he's not cheap, even though he's probably one of the more expensive places, maybe one of the most expensive places you can buy gold and silver, right? So, this is really important, I think. It's not, that money is not going to waste when you buy rounds from him. You're helping fund education for everybody else and yourself. And if everybody did that, everybody would be way more educated and everybody would get richer in the end anyway because of having all this great financial advice from Mike Maloney that used to be only for members, but now he gives that information to everybody for free, right? Like, so then everybody knows when to make the switch from, stocks and real estate to gold, and when to make the switch from gold back into stocks and real estate again. Using the data, the graphs and the math and stuff that he tells you, right? He's not going to necessarily tell us, everything we need to know when to make those switches and stuff if we're not buying products from him. We can't expect to just buy our silver and gold from AppMex or Provident Metals and yet still be able to get lots of free information from Mike Maloney. If we don't buy his stuff, then he won't have enough money to make educational videos or the free time or the inclination to do so. He said that each of his Hidden Secrets of Money videos costs, if I remember correctly, $200,000 per video. And he's made 10 of those. That's $2 million that he's spent making those educational videos for us that we can watch on his YouTube channel for free, right? $2 million is a lot of money to spend on educating the public for free. He does not have to do that. You know what I mean? In a sense, it's to his advantage to do so because then people are more educated about gold and silver, especially noobs, and then they'll decide to start buying gold and silver, and then Mike Maloney might make a sale. He might make some money, but he's already... he already has several of those videos made. He doesn't have to keep making more of them. And yet he does so anyway. He even said the reason he started his gold and silver company was that, like I said, so that he could have the money to fund educational videos like the Hidden Secrets of Money videos. So I think we gold and silver advocates, especially those of us who have benefited from Mike Maloney's videos, should buy some gold and silver from Mike Maloney. It might be more expensive than elsewhere, but at least that money goes somewhere useful. It goes into making more Hidden Secrets of Money videos, which are really valuable, and which not only help ourselves, but other people as well. I think we are honor-bound, out of gratitude, to at least occasionally buy Mike Maloney's silver or gold, right? And we're bound by wisdom to do so, because we know the money is going to a worthy cause, that of educating more people about gold and silver and educating them in a deeper way. More information is always better, and there's quite a bit to learn about gold and silver, and a lot of it is important, not just, weird random facts. It's important to know that gold and silver are, over the long term, immune to inflation. It's important to know that gold and silver are suppressed in price. It's important to know that the real price of gold and silver today, if everyone wanted to buy gold and silver to protect themselves, it's important to know what the real price of gold and silver would be today if everyone wanted to buy gold and silver to protect themselves in hyperinflation, Right? Like if we had a hyperinflation, what would be the real price of gold and silver? It's important to know that. You know, the real price of gold and silver would be way higher than today's price in a hyperinflation. And I'm not talking about in worthless hyperinflationary dollars. I'm talking about in purchasing power because of everybody wanting them. And the higher demand creating a higher price in purchasing power, not just in inflated useless dollars. You know, the real price of a monetary metal like gold or silver is way higher. And unmanipulated price alone is way higher. Even if it weren't, you know, driven by hyperinflation into getting everybody to buy it, even if they just stopped manipulating the price, that alone would make the price go way up. It's important to know that if gold and silver are confiscated again, then you can legally hold on to your gold and silver by buying silver eagles because they're numismatic by definition, by law. U.S. law defines eagles as numismatic, as Belang P. very helpfully showed us in a video. They don't have to be graded by PCGS. They don't have to be proof versions or reverse proof versions of coins. Just plain boring silver eagles of, you know, scratched or whatever. They don't even have to be in good condition. They are legally defined as still being numismatic. And the last time the gold and silver were confiscated by law in the 1930s, there was an exception made in the law that made an exception for numismatic coins. It's important to know that the ratio, so, you know, if you save in only silver eagles and gold eagles of whatever size, then it's the case that, you know, if the government outlaws gold and silver but makes an exception for numismatic coins again and still defines numismatic coins as silver eagle and still defines silver eagles as numismatic like at present, then your silver eagles and gold eagles will be able to be legally kept. You know, whereas everybody else who has rounds and keeps their silver and refuses to turn it in, they're breaking the law. But you won't be. So if, you know, it's ever found out that you have gold and silver, the government, number one, won't be able to confiscate it. And number two, won't be able to send you to jail for having not turned it in. It's important to know the ratio of silver to gold in the Earth's crust also. And the silver to gold ratio in terms of like how much is mined every year. There's, you know, about 10 times as much silver mined as there is gold every year. It's important to know how common it is for there to be silver to gold ratio of 100. That is how rare it is. Where you can buy 100 ounces of silver for 1 ounce of gold. You need to know how rare that is so that when you see that happen, you know that it's the time to buy silver, not gold. Unless, of course, you have no gold. In which case, then you probably want to diversify and buy gold if you already have a bunch of silver. It's important to know when precious metals are undervalued relative to stocks and real estate and stuff like that, so you can ride the wealth cycle. You know, and when precious metals are overvalued compared to stocks and real estate. You know, like stuff like that. You know, you got to know when metals are undervalued compared to real estate. You got to know when metals are overvalued compared to real estate. You know, so that you know when to buy and sell your metals. And if you have a lot of metal, that because you've been dollar cost averaging, stacking every month, then you eventually will have enough money in precious metals. You could sell a bunch of your precious metals, like half of them, and buy real estate. And yet, at the same time, you're still keeping a bunch in precious metals. So if there's some catastrophic collapse, you're still safe. But yet you're still able to ride the wealth cycle with, you know, half of your precious metals holdings, you know? And there's a lot more important stuff to know besides that. It's good to know that mining stocks go up more than gold and silver do, but yet they do so after gold and silver go up in price. It's good to know that silver moves not just more than gold does, but moves later. First gold goes up, then silver goes up, and goes up higher. Then mining stocks go up. It's also good to know that mining stocks are not always a great investment because they can over-dilute their stock, issuing too much stock. There's all kinds of important stuff to know about gold and silver. Do a lot of research. You should. You know, you should go out there and do a lot of research on YouTube. You know, watch all of Belang P's videos. Watch all of Mike Maloney's videos. You know, watch a bunch of interviews with Rick Rule. Watch a bunch of, you know, interviews with, you know, Jim Sinclair and Jim Rickards and Jim Rogers. Like, watch a bunch of those kind of videos, you know. Watch all, or at least all of Mike Maloney's videos, not just his Hidden Secrets of Money videos, but all his other videos as well. And he's got a ton of other shorter videos. And most of them are important. You know, they may not be professionally produced and have, you know, animation and stuff like the Hidden Secrets of Money videos do, but, you know, they're still important. And if you benefit from Mike Maloney's videos, which I'm pretty damn sure you will if you watch them, then buy a little silver or gold from him, even if he's not your preferred place to buy gold and silver from. Even if you only buy your gold or silver from him once a month, or, you know, I mean once a year, like 1 month out of every year, you buy gold or silver from Mike Maloney. Just view that as the cost for having been educated by him. You know, view it as like you doing the honorable thing and paying him back for him having educated you for free about gold and silver and all the stuff that you didn't know about it. Watch every one of Blang P's videos. You know, if he had a cryptocurrency account and I knew how to use cryptocurrency, I'd send him some cryptocurrency out of gratitude for all the stuff I've learned from watching his videos. His videos are super important. He's doing a massive, massive public service. Blang P's channel is one of the best channels on all of YouTube. I'd say Blang P's channel and Zeitgeist Eater's channels are two of the best channels on YouTube. Watch other people's videos too. Learn which forms of silver or gold are the best to invest in to make money by flipping them after holding them for a few years. Like, you know, buying numismatic coins. Not like numismatic in terms of history, like they're really old, but numismatic in terms of like, you know, you're buying a really nice or a great, well-graded panda, or you're buying a proof panda. And the pandas typically go up in value a lot over 5 or 10 years, especially over like 10, 20 years, the pandas go way up in value. So, you know, you're buying numismatically when you're buying pandas, even though they're not legally numismatic in the U.S., right, according to the law, but they are numismatic in terms that they appreciate way more than the price of silver appreciates. You know, they go up way more than silver goes up. So they're better than rounds in that sense. But you're going to way overpay for them also, so that kind of cuts into your profit margin. So then you got to make a calculation of whether you think it'll be worth it or not, and then it's kind of messy. And if you're good at it, you can make money. But like, you know, you probably got to have a good memory and really be into studying it and stuff, and then you can make money. But if you're just really lazy and sloppy about it, you probably lose money if you buy numismatic coins like pandas. So yeah, you know, learn which kinds of gold and silver are best to invest in by flipping, if that's what you want to do. You know, learn which forms of gold and silver are best for buying cheap and holding for a long period of time, so just 40 years. Like, you know, bars and generic 1 ounce rounds from like Sunshine Mint or whatever are some of the best for buying for that. Learn that, you know, silver shot is not good to buy because you can only sell it to a refiner and they'll only give you 80% of spot, and thus you'll get really screwed over if you buy shot. Unless you're going to be making your own silver rounds, in which case then you can resell those to other people. You know, then you're a little business of your own, and then you can make a profit that way. But otherwise, don't buy silver shot. But there's other things you shouldn't buy also. You know, you need to know why you're buying and buy the right thing for that purpose. And we need to buy stuff from Mike Maloney who give us free information, because nothing is really free, and we have to make it possible for people like him to keep giving us important information. You know, and he will give us even more information if a lot more of us buy silver and gold from him instead of just sucking up his content for free and not paying him back for it. We need to keep people like Mike Maloney in business, because you have to see people like Blang P and Mike Maloney for what they are. They are like generals in a rebel army which is at war with the current evil, propagandizing, genocidal, enslaving system which runs on and is dependent on fiat currency. Without these generals, we would be way, way worse off. You know what I mean? Don't just think of yourself. You're like, oh, I already know about gold and silver, so I don't need to buy gold and silver from them. I'm not learning anything new. Well, think about those guys and how important it is for them to stay around for the next generation, so that the next generation will be able to get red-pilled. You see, you got to think of all the people in the future who will not be red-pilled, will not start saving in gold and silver if Blang P and Mike Maloney stop making videos. So we need to help people like Blang P and Mike Maloney so that they keep making videos so that the next generation can get red-pilled also. I also want to mention that part of Motherland, this is a totally different topic. In an episode of Motherland, like the balloons get blown away by all the witches and stuff, and I was like, what is the symbolism here? And I was like, okay, is it so that like if women speak up, they can stop terrorist attacks from happening? Is that the symbolism that they're trying to like, you know, inculcate all their female viewers with? And if so, that is completely incorrect in my opinion. Unlike MGTOW, no one started an official go on a spree movement. That's not why Alec Manasseh and you know, Elliot Rodger did what they did, but yet these sprees happen anyway. You know, there was an official MGTOW movement started with the MGTOW Manifesto, right? Well, there was no official, like, incel go on a spree movement. Yet the sprees are happening anyway. Why? Because cause and effect. Conditions lead to responses by the people. Men's promiscuity creates a shortage of women and an unnaturally high SMV of bottom 80% women and an unnaturally low SMV of bottom 80% men. And this means that a large incel problem is created. And when you deny men of you know, a basic biological need, like, you know, the ability to have sex, that's almost as bad as depriving men of food or water. And when you deprive the population of food or water, you have a revolutionary war over that. Well, you know, these incels like Alec Manasseh and Elliot Rodger, they are warriors in a new war being fought over not food and water, but sex. You know, they're being disenfranchised so hardcore that they have to go on a spree because of it. So cause and effect, you know, you deprive people too badly, there will be a backlash. You know, so you don't even need an official movement to make it happen. You know what I mean? those horrible conditions lead to the response of people going on sprees because life for those people is not worth living. And the past generation sold them down the river. The boomers sold them down the river, and now there's little, and Gen X did too a little bit, and now there's no hope for their generation, and they know it. They know they have no future, and they know the present has nothing good about it either. You know, their standard of living sucks. The future's looking even bleaker. You know, they're being deprived of their basic needs of love and sex. They can't, so they go on a spree. You know, no organization required, no movement required. Tyranny breeds terrorism. It's just natural. It's unavoidable. If you're going to have horrific tyranny, terrorism will always happen. The only way to stop the terrorism is to stop the tyranny. That's the only way. You know, it's really that simple. And yet maybe the show was trying to get women to flag more videos on YouTube so as to assist the censors in stomping out channels that are subversive, channels which promote use of exsanguinating force. But even if women were to flag all channels like mine and YouTube were a shiny, happy, perfect, safe space for everyone, well, it would still not stop the sprees. In fact, it would be like putting something in a pressure cooker. The pressure just builds up. It may seem peaceful for a while, but that's only before the explosion. You know, this lockdown might prevent, due to increased censorship because of women flagging more channels because of propaganda telling them to, this lockdown might prevent sprees from happening in the short term, but in the long term it would make the backlash way worse. And even in the short term it might make it so that way more men go on sprees. You know, that's the problem with government. That's the problem with laws. That's the problem with, you know, stifling anyone from doing anything that they want to do. You prevent them from waking people up. You know, like if you're being disenfranchised, you need to have the freedom to be able to make someone suffer for having, you know, disenfranchised you, because only then will they stop disenfranchising you. You know, you prevent them from being able to, when you make laws, you prevent people from being able to make the people who are oppressing them pay a price. Right? And then that creates pressure, and the pressure builds up, and then horrible things happen. Terrorism happens. People use a car to run down a bunch of protesters, like Alec Manassian, or you know, what is his name? Elliot Rodger, you know, does what he does. You know, when you create laws, you're merely shutting off a much-needed pressure valve. When you close off all the pressure release valves, then the thing eventually explodes, huge. You know, and not in a good way. I mean, like a you know, just a huge explosion. It's horrible. You know, and all the ANCAPs, alt-right people, MGTOWs, incels, libertarians, etc., if all of them move to the same state, to the same county, in the same state, until there are like 10 times as many patriarchal people in that county as there were liberals, well then if those patriarchal guys, and maybe some girls, just went around slapping every single liberal in the face every day, every time they see a liberal, just bam, they slap them in the face. And there's like, you know, 10 million people in this one county who are all conservatives, and there's only like, you know, 500,000 to a million liberals in the county. Well then, like, there's way more conservatives in the county slapping liberals, and then there'd be so many people there that doing it, it would be impossible to arrest them. There would not be that many cops to arrest them, and there would not be enough jail cells to put them in. So they would never be able to arrest them for doing it. Just like the cops in some cities now are not arresting people shooting up heroin in broad daylight in the cities, just sitting on the street shooting up heroin. They don't arrest them because there's so many of them doing it these days. You see, same thing, even more so, if 90% of the people in a county were slapping liberals in the face every single day, there would not be enough cops or jail cells or anything to arrest those people. It would basically be legal then at that point to slap liberals. And nobody would get arrested for it because the cops would just have to throw up their hands and admit that this is a thing that cannot be stopped. And then the liberals would get really sick of getting slapped in the face every single day. And then they would all move out of that area. And then you got an area populated only by patriarchal people, freedom-oriented people. Then those patriarchal people could turn that area into a no-go zone and then start working on turning it into its own country. And the government can't force people to live there. It can't, like, force liberals to move into that conservative area, not when liberals don't want to move in there because of being at risk of being slapped in the face every single day if they move in there. So then the government, you know, couldn't do anything. All that it could do is maybe send in tanks and retake the area with the military, you know, but they wouldn't be able to stay there forever, you know, occupying the area with tanks. They'd have to leave eventually. And then they just, you know, the conservatives just take back over the area all over again the second the cops and the military leave, you know? So, like, this is something that, like, but even if you wanted to fight the military and the tanks and stuff, I think, 10 million conservatives, or even just 1 million conservatives in an area with no liberals whatsoever, and everybody is a hardcore conservative, a hardcore libertarian, or a hardcore ANCAP, or a hardcore MGTOW, whatever. Like, or a hardcore incel, these guys could absolutely keep the government out, even if the government sent in the military to retake the area. I think they would easily be able to keep the military out because they're so dense and they're so hardcore and they're so well armed. What's the military going to do? Send in like 100,000, 500,000 military with the best weapons to take back this tiny little county? No, they couldn't do anything. They would absolutely be able to keep the military out. Because the military would only bother trying to take back the area if the military could just use a small amount of the military to take back the area. If the military had to use 50 or 70 or 100% of the military to take back this tiny little county, they would never bother with that. They got wars to win overseas. They got the rest of the country to keep under control, etc., etc. They're not going to, use the whole military to take back one county in one state. You know what I'm saying? But even if you didn't want to fight, like I said, you just let them occupy the area, and then when they leave in a few months or weeks or a year, then you just take over the area all over again. You know what I mean? Like, they can't keep tanks and the military in this one little county forever. You know what I mean? So then the area gets to be free again, gets to be totally free of liberals, and can instantly go back to kicking the cops out and slapping any liberals in the face if any liberals do move back into the area. And then it will be just a purely conservative area. Nobody but, MGTOWs, incels, alt-right guys, hardcore conservatives, maybe not neocons, but like, libertarians and like ANCAPs and stuff. Like only those kind of people living in that area. It'll be a purely conservative area, and then it can start working on making itself independent enough to where it eventually becomes its own country, to where it separates from the U.S. and is totally free. So yeah, my main point that I wanted to make was just that obviously, number one, women cannot stop violence with their voices alone, and they're not strong enough to stop it with physical force. And number two, even if XXers manage to lock society down even more by reporting offensive people who advocate exsanguination of people, well, then that will just create more pressure, and then that pressure will eventually result in horrific backlash, the likes of which they can't even imagine. Like, banning guns will not solve the problem either. You will just be able to use a car like Alec Manassian did. And if cars all get that automatic braking thing and no longer have the manual mode so you can't use a car as a weapon, well then people will start poisoning food at the grocery store, or start poisoning the water supply, or they'll start destroying the infrastructure, and they'll start making homemade things which explode. I don't want to use the B word. And will then start taking out bridges with those things which, go boom. You don't even need cars. It's easy to win. All you got to do is have a bit of courage and destroy the infrastructure. The problem is that men these days don't have courage. And an even bigger problem with courage, screw that, you don't even need to take out bridges. All you need to do is just buy a little knife. And again, you don't even need to use a knife. You could take any pointy metal thing and file it down until it's like a spike. And then you just walk around and you just covertly pop tires. You could bring your city, or even your entire state, if you had enough people, to a grinding halt just by going around and popping tires every day. That's all you'd have to do. And if the conservatives don't want to help you take back the area, well then fuck them, pop their tires too. Because if they're not helping you, they're helping the enemy. So just go around popping everybody's tires. And then when nobody can get to work because of everybody's tires being popped every single day, and they're having to buy new tires every single day because you got, 5 or 10% of the population being hardcore incels who have no interest in doing anything other than going around popping tires. And there's so many of them that there's not enough cops to watch everybody, so everybody's popping tires all the time. Like, you can't go through a day without getting every one of your tires popped if you, take your car out of the garage. When that's the case, nobody can get to work anymore. If nobody can get to work anymore, nobody can pay taxes anymore. If nobody can pay taxes anymore, the government collapses. You could literally destroy the government merely by popping tires. And all you got to do is have enough people to do it. And you don't even need a majority of the country to do it. You probably only need 5 to 10% of the population going around popping tires all day long. As many tires as they can. All doing it at the same time of day, so there's not enough cops to stop them. What are you going to like, how do you even stop it? Like, yeah, you could, make sure, like, you could, try to stop, stake out your car after you leave it because you're going to go into the grocery store. You try and hide and see if anybody's popped the tires, but maybe people are watching you, and then finally when you're like, okay, nobody's going to pop my tires. Then you go into the grocery store, you spend a half hour shopping, you come back out, well, they've been watching you, and then when you actually went inside, they popped your tires. And now you just can't ever stop your tires from being popped every single day, every one of your tires. Like, you could literally take down the government and destroy the entire society just by popping tires. It really is that simple, right? Yeah, and you probably only need 1 to 10% of the population doing it before you would be able to pop tires. I mean, think about it. A city with like 50,000 people in it probably only has like, 10 to 20 cops. Maybe 30 or 40. Let's say they have 50 cops. Even just 1% of 50,000 population, that's 500 people. That's still already 10 times as many people as there are cops. And so even if the cops are just one person per car, how are they going to stop people? You know, like, how are they going to stop 500 men from going around popping tires every day in the same city? There's not enough cops to stop it. You know what I'm saying? You literally could destroy the government and take back and win a revolutionary war just by popping tires. Literally. Think about it. It's the easiest thing in the world. You literally could win a revolutionary war and destroy the government utterly just by popping tires. You literally could. I mean, considering all the other things I say that people don't seem to believe me on, even though to me it's like super, super obvious and undeniable, I don't know how to explain it any more clearly, but it really just is absolutely undeniable that you could literally win a revolutionary war by popping tons and tons of tires. You and just like 1% of your city's population. You know, all you got to do is, you know, have a little bit of courage. You know, the problem these days is that men have no courage. And an even bigger problem with courage is that it allows the bad guys, the elites, the bigger problem with not having courage, that is that it allows the bad guys, the elites, a longer time period with which to achieve their victory. You know, if you allow the government to kick the can enough times, then eventually technology improves, and this gives increased power to the government. Power which the government can and does then use to lock people down, to enslave people even further. And then this means that if you do not use force, if you don't force the issue by using courage, if you make it possible that the government could perhaps kick the can down the road forever, maybe. You know, it's already been able to kick the can down the road probably 40 years longer than it should have been able to. It has never been that way before in all of human history because technology never existed in the abundance that it was like always constantly increasing. That was never the case before. You know, so there was never this like perpetually more and more and more standard of living to siphon off and more control possible to enslave people. That was never possible before. There was only a limit to how much tyranny could be done throughout all of human history. The king did that much tyranny. He eventually made taxes too high, and then the people overthrew him, and it was a cycle. But that cycle has been broken by advances of technology, which just makes the government endlessly more powerful. So you need courage to take down the government so that you can stop this endless power of government, you know, by it constantly having more and more standard of living to siphon away from people so that it can enslave people more and more and more. You got to stop that new evil cycle that has been started, which isn't even a cycle. It's just a new trend toward endless tyranny. You know, the boot stamping on the face of humanity forever, like George Orwell talked about at the end of 1984. You know, like people aren't going to rebel unless they get so poor that they're starving. And then so because they never starve, because we're constantly always making more and more food, we're producing more and more food per acre every year, and you know, more and more tyranny and all the rest of it. So people never truly get so poor that they're starving. So we never get enough people willing to, you know, fight the government and die trying because, you know, no one's so gung-ho against the government because they're still not starving. So the public's cowardice also makes it so that the elites can enslave us so slowly, so gradually, that it's imperceptible, especially to those young people being born into it, because it seems normal to those young people, just like the bisexuality propaganda on TV. This is like, the kids who are like 10 years old now, they're going to grow up seeing this stuff, because it's starting to become more and more ubiquitous. So by the time they're 13, they've already seen quite a bit of it, and now they're going through puberty seeing this evil shit, and they start, and then you get a whole next generation. You're going to get a whole next generation here soon, where like, you know, probably 30 to 50, maybe even 70 or 80% of guys don't identify as straight. They either identify as like sexuality fluid or bisexual or something like that. It's going to be really scary because they grew up in it. And you know, people who grow up in fiat currency, they think that's normal too. Like whatever you grow up into, whatever you're born into seems normal to you, even if it's completely abnormal and evil. You know, so the government can literally enslave us by boiling the proverbial frog. Maybe I shouldn't have said literally, but the government can enslave us like boiling the proverbial frog. That is so slowly that the frog doesn't even realize that he's being boiled alive. That is, the temperature is like really comfortable at first, but then the heat is turned up super slowly. So then the water just gets a little bit hotter, a little bit hotter, a little bit hotter, and it happens so gradually that the frog never even notices. And this is why it's essential to fight back in one way or another. We have to force things to a head. But I think it's realistic to say that we can never regain the country because the conservatives are cowardly statist idiots who, like Morgan Freeman said in the movie Seven, they just want to watch TV and eat cheeseburgers. You know, and so there's only one good real option remaining to us, and that is to walk away by forming no-go zones. When I said we can't regain the country, I mean we can't take over the whole country and make it good again. But we can form a commune or a no-go zone or something like that, where it eventually becomes big enough and rich enough, and we kick all the liberals out of it so that it becomes a no-go zone filled only with conservatives, and then it's basically its own country at that time. We can do that still, and we have to do it. It's the only option, really. We have to join together in meat space to form our own peaceful communities that keep out outsiders, and which do not try to overthrow the government, but which are willing and able to use exsanguination against cops or SWAT if the government tries to take down the commune, tries to invade the commune, tries to arrest people in the commune, tries to confiscate the commune's wealth or anything like that. Then the commune will fight back with force. But if the government leaves the commune alone, the commune leaves the government alone. This is the true walking away. This is the true solution to the problem, not MGTOW's fake walking away. And this really is the only solution to the problem that I can see. And this solution must be married, this solution must be joined to the solution of using eugenic breeding also. Because both eugenic breeding is essential and having your own community is essential. They're both essential. So it's like a combination solution. You got to do both those things. I genuinely don't understand why so many smart people seem totally unwilling to even try to create their own community. People like Jim Rickards and Rick Rule should be smart enough to see that eventually we will be utterly enslaved. All of us will be. Even the people like Jim Rickards and Rick Rule will be utterly enslaved if they don't take a stand. If we don't all take a stand, or at least a lot of us, a small minority, like 1% of the population or something. If we don't take a stand, all of us will be utterly enslaved eventually, because the tyranny just keeps getting worse and worse. Or, maybe these guys like Rick Rule and Jim Rickards just don't give a shit because they're old, and so they know it's not going to happen in their lifetime. Like, let the next 2 or 3 generations fight for their freedom. I'm not going to see this utter tyranny in my lifetime, so screw them. Or maybe it's just like I can't do anything to stop it. But, really, I really think they can do something. And so the fact they're not doing something, I think it has to be a testament to either their idiocy or they're delusional. They really don't think it's that bad, or just the fact that, they're just selfish and they don't want to spend their money on helping other people and bring back freedom, But I don't understand why more gold and silver advocates don't advocate that patriarchal people form communes which use exsanguination, if necessary, to keep the cops out. If they're so opposed to fiat currency, these silver bugs and gold bugs, then why aren't they incredibly opposed to the existence of the genocidal propagandizing government which forces that fiat currency on us? And who says that we'll be able to keep amassing gold and silver if the government outlaws gold and silver and platinum and all the rest of the metals? Like, the government, outlawed personal ownership of this stuff before. Who says they're not going to do it again? The government could create a Fed coin cryptocurrency that enslaves us all and could outlaw gold and silver. Like, sure, you could always use a little mining box that you like. It's like a little box, like a rectangular 3-dimensional box that it's got little levels, and you can dump each one, and each level is more refined and gets heavier stuff until eventually the final level only collects gold. So you can dump a ton of dirt and water and rocks and gravel and stuff from a river or from a riverbed or from the dirt around a river, and you just dump a bunch of that in the box, and then the water goes through, and then you dump the higher levels of the thing, the rocks which aren't gold out, and then you dump more, and then you dump the ones that aren't gold out, and you dump that. You just keep doing that, and then eventually you get a little bit of gold at the bottom, right? You could use a mining box like that to keep mining gold even after it's illegal. Such a mining box is a great thing to have because it could help you survive in a massive economic collapse, and it could help you amass gold when gold is outlawed so that you're not able to buy gold. But so then how do you get gold? Well, you can mine it yourself like that using a little, gold mining box. So you could then keep amassing more and more gold for decades by mining it yourself like that until gold is eventually once again made legal, maybe 50 or 100 years later after it was outlawed. They could outlaw gold, 5 or 10 years from now. It could be illegal for 50 or 100 years, and then in 100 years from now, or 50 or 100 years from now, then becomes legal again. That could totally happen. It happened before. They outlawed it in the 30s, and it didn't become legal again to own gold until the 70s, right? So this could totally happen because it happened before in America. Then you could, if it's made illegal again, then you can keep amassing gold by using a gold mining box like this. I don't remember what they're called. They're not called a gold mining box, but that's what it is. So, I don't know how to look it up because I saw it on Junie Smallpiece channel. He talked about it once, so I don't know how to look it up or what they're called or whatever. But you can get one of those, and I think it costs like $200 or something like that. The thing, or maybe it was 400, but whatever. It wasn't that expensive if I remember correctly. The gold mining box. So you could like amass a bunch of gold during that 50 or 100-year period. You and your descendants could, just keep mining every weekend until you get like a few ounces, maybe several ounces. And of course, during this whole entire period, the pressure is covertly building up until gold is going to become worth way, way more when it's made legal again, right? You're getting richer and richer and richer, even though you can't sell that gold. When you can sell it 50 or 100 years later, you will make your descendants very rich, right? Or at least a lot less poor. And what if there's like a massive, horrific economic collapse and you don't even have a job, and most people don't? Like, how would you survive? Like, if the government's not trying to feed you or anything, there's no freemium system, you're just starving to death. Well, you could use such a gold mining box to, accrue gold and then sell it either on the market or illegally. If gold is illegal at that time, you could, sell gold on the black market, and then you could buy food with the cash that you get for the gold. You see what I'm saying? So, like, you could feed yourself or your family with such a gold mining box in an economic collapse, even if gold were illegal. So this is something to know. Jim Rickards may advocate that we own gold and then America go back on a gold standard, but he himself said in his book that gold is already illegal in many countries of the world. And so what the hell is he thinking by seemingly assuming that such a thing will never happen here? Like, who says that it can't happen here? Who says? Just because gold is legal once again now doesn't mean that it won't be outlawed again. Gold could easily be outlawed again. The government in America, the government can and will do whatever it wants if the people let it get away with doing whatever it wants. The people are the true check on the government's power, not the so-called balance of powers, not the judicial system or the Supreme Court or people's ability to sue or the ACLU or anything like that. None of that is the real thing that keeps a check on government's power. It is the people and their knowledge and their appreciation for freedom and their willingness to fight, even physically if necessary, to hold the government accountable and to get the government to go back on the tyrannical things it was trying to do. Only the people are a true check on the government's power. Mainly it's the people and their willingness, or rather unwillingness, to tolerate something which prevents the government from doing that thing. Only if the people are by no means willing to tolerate something will the government backtrack on it. Which is all the more reason to form your own community like Pastor Dowell has done. I love that guy. He's great. You should watch his videos. He's not a genius or anything, but he's got his head on straight regarding a lot of topics, and it's just super inspiring and admirable to see what he's doing and what he believes and how he expresses himself. He has guns. He has silver. He believes in virtue. He distrusts government. He believes in being independent and having stored food and all kinds of prepper stuff, etc., etc. He's awesome. Seriously, his channel is called Pastor Dowell, and there's no space between the words pastor and Dowell, but I think pastor is capitalized, the P is capitalized, and Dowell is capitalized, the D is capitalized. So, look him up and watch his videos. He's awesome. I love that guy. The attitude of today's MGTOW men is the exact same as the attitude of today's gold bugs and silver bugs. So it's not like I have some kind of grudge against MGTOW or something. It's that I hate it when people act like there's no other options other than just keeping your head down and trying to find loopholes to avoid the tyranny. Yeah, that's one way of functioning and surviving, but like Zeitgeist Eater has said, which I already knew, but had not been able to phrase it as cogently and concisely as he did, he said, eventually MGTOW men are going to run out of places to hide. Zeitgeist Eater said it perfectly. I mean, I'm paraphrasing from memory, but that's basically exactly what he said. Right? Eventually, the system will close all the loopholes, and MGTOW men will no longer have anywhere to run, anywhere to hide. Eventually, the loopholes will all be closed, and they will have nowhere to run or hide from inflation or taxation or, anything else. They'll be forced to marry because of a super high bachelor tax, etc. The government will eliminate cash, will create a Fed coin that is inflationary and also tracks all your purchases, data which will then be fed into what is today called artificial intelligence, some kind of algorithm that predicts things and or is an adaptive algorithm. They'll be able to predict all kinds of things about you. And then we'll be living in a world of pre-crime. You'll be arrested even before you commit the crime because they will have determined with a high degree of accuracy with the data that they get from your use of FedCoin and with the algorithms that they use, artificially intelligent algorithms that they use to surveil your data that you give them with use of FedCoin, this government cryptocurrency that everybody is forced to use. And then they'll be like, okay, the algorithm determined that you are 99% likely to commit such and such a crime due to, from analyzing this data that you gave us by use of FedCoin, the way you use the FedCoin. And so, 99% chance you would have committed this crime. So, we're going to arrest you. And, even before you were even thinking or planning of committing the crime, even thinking or planning to commit the crime, even before it occurred to you to commit the crime, maybe, even before you even thought of committing the crime, they figure out that you're going to eventually do it in the next year or two or whatever, or 5 years or whatever. So then they'll, either arrest you and put you in jail, or they'll just surveil you really closely after then. They'll put you on probation, even though you've done nothing. And then they'll, watch you super, super closely after that. And you'll have zero freedom to do anything that might be considered even slightly subversive. The government will close all the loopholes if we let it. The government will keep propagandizing us to be more divided, more hedonistic, more cowardly, more gullible regarding believing government, more sexually degenerate, non-hetero, etc. The government will stop us from owning a weapon, buying gold and silver, or they won't let us buy gold and silver anymore. They won't let us have a weapon anymore. They'll do away with the Second Amendment, or at least they won't do so. Or they'll maybe let us still have gold and silver, but they'll make it unprofitable for us to own those things. Thus, radically decreasing the number of people who own gold and silver, because the government, all it has to do is put a 50% tax on gold and silver, and then that would basically make it so that it would take almost forever to recoup that. It would take a ton of years to recoup that by not having to pay inflation because of gold gradually going up in price over the decades. Maybe your gold goes up 70% over your lifetime, over 40 years, but you had to pay 50% on it in taxes when you bought it, so you barely saved yourself any money. You know what I mean? And then if you have to resell during an emergency to raise cash, you're going to lose money due to that exchange. So then it's it makes it so gold and silver use is completely worthless, just because of the 50% tax on gold and silver. You see what I mean? But I guess that's also another reason to own one of those gold mining boxes, because then you could accrue gold for free without having to pay the tax. You see? So that would also be a big advantage of having one of those boxes. You'd be able to still mine gold even when gold is legal, but is basically worthless to own because of the high tax. Right? I think it's in England or somewhere like that. I think you have to pay 30% on gold and silver. 30% tax or something like that. It's insane. I mean, I could be wrong about that. I could be totally remembering it wrong because, I saw this video, a couple of years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, I saw that video. But whatever. I think they have a way higher tax on gold and silver in England or Ireland or somewhere like that than we do in America. You know what I mean? So all they'd have to do, the government just put a 50% tax on purchases of gold or silver, and basically no one would want to buy gold and silver anymore because there'd be no advantage in doing so, basically. Right? Unless you're really, really long-sighted and very benevolent, and then you choose to buy gold or silver in order to pass it down to your descendants so that they can pass it down to their descendants so that maybe 200 years later, your descendants can finally sell it for a huge profit. And then, the precious metals would be worth 100 times what they were before, and then it will have been worth it, because 50% sales tax will be irrelevant. Although, instead of a 50% sales tax, they could do what Jim Rickards mentioned in the book, The New Case for Gold, and they could do a huge profit tax for gold and silver. So no matter how long you hold the gold, the government's going to take, 70, 80, 90% of the profits that you made from the gold and silver, right? So that would make it worthless to, have gold and silver, or to buy gold and silver as well. Or they could, even worse, do both. They could do a 50% tax on the gold and silver when you buy it, and then a 30, 50, 70, 90% windfall tax for the profits of the gold and silver when you sell it. So there's basically no way to profit from having gold and silver, right? The only way to profit then would be to, mine it yourself using a gold mining box by a river, doing that every weekend for years and years and years, and having your kids do it too, and then, selling the gold or silver on the black market. You could do that, but that would really probably be the only way to profit from gold and silver in the future if they raise the taxes high enough. So eventually they close all the loopholes, and you have to use force to force the government to stop doing this BS. Eventually there comes a point where, you will be utterly, utterly enslaved and life will be hell for you, or you can risk your life to get freedom back. Really, that's the choice, and it's better to start doing it now because it's easier to win now than it will be in the future. You see, although the worse the oppression gets, the more people will join your side, so in that sense, it'll be easier to fight the Revolutionary War in the future. Yeah, let's see here, back to the script. Of course, yeah, passing your precious metals on to your descendants, though, such as if there's like a 50% tax and it's only profitable to save your money in gold and silver if you're going to save it for your great grandkids, your great great grandkids or something, that assumes that you'll be able to make your descendants patient enough and benevolent enough to hold the metals for that long and then buy more in order to pass on to their kids and grandkids. While no one spends anything for literally 200 years or longer, so that the amount of gold and silver accrues more and more and more. Right? But, of course, if the government continues propagandizing us to be hedonistic and short-sighted and consumerist and keeps stealing our wealth, then our descendants that are financially well-off enough and are patient enough and benevolent enough to be able to save precious metals for that long with no reward, they'll pass on their money, but then each generation will be poorer than the last, and then none of them will be able to save any gold, and they might even have to liquidate their gold that they get from their parents or grandparents that have been passed on down for 2 or 3 generations. They'll have to liquidate that and sell it for cash just to survive. And so then you won't be able to pass on your gold or silver for 200 years. You see, just because of the extreme and increasing poverty caused by greater and greater and greater forms of taxation. Overt, covert, and ancillary and all other kinds. So it really is the case you have to fight. But the best way is not to fight and try to take down the whole government. It's to form a commune, because that's way safer. The government's much more likely to just leave you the hell alone. And if the sheeple don't want to fight and the government's just content to prey off the sheeple and leave you alone, well then hell, let the sheeple be preyed on by the government. You'll live free in this huge commune that's getting bigger and bigger and richer and more well-armed. And then eventually it'll, 100, 200 years later, it will be powerful and rich enough to become its own government. I mean, not its own government, its own country, right? Like an ANCAP country or a libertarian country or whatever. Or balkanize it and make an ANCAP country, a libertarian country, and maybe a MGTOW country, right? So, even this whole passing it down for a couple hundred years thing will not work because of the reasons I just stated. Government and corporations propagandizing us to be hedonistic, consumerist, shallow, selfish, short-sighted, etc. is something that makes such a long-term strategy of gold and silver ownership much less viable. And so all the government, not to mention the bigger government gets, the more it propagandizes its people to be unvirtuous. The more unvirtuous people are, the less grateful they are. Therefore, the less likely they are to be able to save the gold and silver that they get from their parents and then pass it on down to their kids. The more likely, the lower their character they have, the worse their moral character due to big government, the more likely they are to sell the gold and silver that you pass down to them. And then they break the cycle, and then you're not able to save money for 200 years and make your descendants rich. Because, after just 2 or 3 generations, they sold it. You know what I'm saying? So, all the government has to do to make the gold and silver totally impossible to use as a savings vehicle is just put a 50% tax on it. I think in England they have a big tax. But now, of course, people then start saving in vanadium or iridium or other things, but then the government just put a 50% tax on all those metals also. At least if those metals are being bought for wealth preservation purposes, of course, instead of by industrial use for companies. Companies would, of course, be given a pass in the law. There'd be an exception in the law allowing them to buy the metals without the tax. Only the individuals who want to save their wealth in the form of the metal, like iridium or vanadium, would have to pay that 50% tax. You see, this is how it would be. The only way around this is courage. Having the courage to form your own community that has the guts and the guns to keep the cops out by using whatever force is necessary, even if that means exsanguinating cops who try to enter the commune against the commune's will. I really can't stand the cowardice of the gold bugs and the silver bugs. You almost never hear any of these silver or gold channels say that we need to get rid of the government completely and have anarcho-capitalism. You pretty much never even hear any of the gold bugs or silver bugs say that we need to get rid of the government and have a libertarian government instead. They don't even say that. It's like these gold bugs that today, these gold and silver bugs are total statists. It's ridiculous, and it's like they're not even libertarian statists who are statists that I don't mind. They're wrong, but I don't mind them. They're good people. They're fairly rational. They're fundamentally deluded, but only in a subtle way. They basically are pro-freedom. I'm in favor of libertarians because they're freedom lovers. But like most gold and silver bugs, they don't even talk about libertarianism. They seem to be just totally on board with statism. Like maybe they're like, oh yeah, the government should be smaller, but what are they really doing and believing? Are they advocating that we really shrink the government by 90%, which would still be even the government shrunk by 90%? Even after shrinking the government by 90%, the government would still be way bigger than it was in the 1800s, especially the early 1800s. You see what I'm saying? So it really is the case the gold bugs and silver bugs of today. They're They're basically hardcore statists, hardcore big government people, even though they probably officially disagree with that. But essentially, they actually are. I think I have way more in common with the average hardcore libertarian than I have in common with the average silver bug or gold bug who is not even a libertarian, much less an anarcho-capitalist. These gold bugs and silver bugs kind of make me sick, for the same reason that MGTOW makes me sick. That reason being that these people just want to live their lives and enjoy themselves and want to find more and more loopholes to wriggle through like a little worm so that they don't have to risk their lives, so that they don't have to oppose the government, so that they don't have to live frugally in order to build a community, so that they don't have to be at risk of going to prison, so that they don't have to truly take a genuine moral stand and put their freedom and life on the line to do the right thing, to stand against tyranny the way that Peter Schiff's father did so. He said no. He said, no, taxation is illegal. Or he said something like, taxation is like I don't have to pay taxes because of this or that reason. He had a reason for saying so, and he was probably legally right. And his son even asserts that his father was legally right in saying that, he legally actually didn't have to pay taxes. So he didn't pay taxes. And then what happened? The government arrested him, threw him in prison. He appealed and everything, but they said, oh, no, you're wrong. You had to pay taxes. He was a person of true principle, Peter Schiff's father, which makes me even more willing to believe that Peter Schiff is not just some, greedy, wandering tribe guy who's advocating gold in order to make money for himself, but he's really not that much in favor of freedom. No, he really actually is in favor of freedom. He calls himself a libertarian. He calls himself a practicing libertarian. And his father was a guy of principle, and morality is probably at least 40 or 50% genetic. And so, yeah, I believe that Peter Schiff is an incredibly moral guy. Or at least a brave freedom lover. Even, I don't know how moral he is in a sex life or whatever, but who knows? But he's a freedom lover, and he genuinely likes freedom, and he genuinely believes in gold, and he's genuinely against the Federal Reserve. So people like him are people that I can get behind. He is one of the good ones, you know what I mean? As far as the people, the wandering tribe are concerned, there are a few people who are good and who I'm a huge fan of. Peter Schiff, Noam Chomsky, who I actually disagree with a lot, but I still totally respect him, and a few others, Israel Shahak, Miko Piled, etc. There's just a few, but those guys are freaking awesome. I love those guys. But yeah, most people don't want to truly take a genuine moral stand like Peter Schiff's father did, because if you do so, you're going to end up in prison, unless you do it with a bunch of other people and you form your own commune and you keep the cops out with physical force. Then you don't have to go to prison for doing the right thing. You can stay out of prison even though you're doing the right thing because the government doesn't want another Waco disaster. MGTOW men and most precious metals fans are the same. They're cowards. They think they can find an endless amount of loopholes and just keep endlessly wriggling through those loopholes so that they never actually have to fight the government or walk away from the government and form their own country by first forming their own commune. These people are deluded. These people are cowards. These people do not truly believe in freedom. These people are hedonists. These people are idiots. These people are feminine. These people are scum. It's really that simple. They're scum. They sure as hell are not men. Real men want to be free no matter what. Real men want to overthrow our tyrannical government and at the very least have the balls to publicly say so, even if they don't have the really ability to be doing it in the physical world because of no one willing to join together with them. They're at least saying that we should be doing it. That's what real men do, right? MGTOWs and silver bugs and gold bugs are not real men. It's not that I have a bias against MGTOW. It's that I have a bias against people who are like this no matter who they are. These people make me sick. Just like the sheeple make me sick. You know what I mean? They tolerate tyranny. They tolerate it day, noon, and night. Just like the villain played by, what's his name? The guy who's in, the movie Seven. God damn it. What was his name? The guy who played the villain in that movie in Seven. He was also in, oh God, my memory's terrible. The Usual Suspects. Kevin Spacey, that's his name. Kevin Spacey's character. Remember he was talking about the 7 deadly sins in that movie? And he said, and that's the point. We all just tolerate it these days. We just sit around and we tolerate it day, noon, and night. I mean, morning, noon, and night. Everybody, you see a deadly sin on every street corner. Sloth or pride. The women are just super prideful. The men and the women are super fat. They're super greedy. There's just so many deadly sins that you see every single day and nobody cares. Right? That's what he was saying. He's saying, no, I'm not tolerating. I'm setting the example. I'm doing it differently. I'm gonna point out that no, this is wrong. Even in me, it's wrong, right? Which is why he arranged it so that he would be killed. Right? That's how it is, man. Everybody's sitting around tolerating insane levels of tyranny. These people all make me sick. Real men do not sit around and bitch and moan about tyranny, acting like, oh yeah, it's unfortunate the government's so tyrannical, but you gotta invest in gold to save yourself. That's not the same as saying, complaining in the sense of like saying, let's get rid of the government. Let's do it. Let's buy guns and go down to Washington, D.C. and overthrow the government the way Hitler did and make the country a wonderful paradise, which would be super easy because all you got to do is get rid of all the almost all the taxation, or all the taxation preferably, and, you know, just like stop all the endless wars, pull all our troops home, shrink the military by 90%, you know, like get rid of all the regulatory agencies and stuff, which are just totally corrupt, as you find out if you watch a documentary about Madoff. You know, like you watch a documentary about Madoff, you find out that, oh yeah, this one guy warned the SEC about Madoff 10 years ago and they did nothing, right? That these regulatory agencies were also warned about gold and silver manipulation, were shown evidence of it, and then said, oh no, there's no manipulation. This is what it is. The regulatory agencies are utterly corrupt as well. And so there's no reason to have regulatory agencies if they're utterly corrupt. You know what I mean? Like, men don't just sit around and complain about tyranny while not saying that we should do something about it. Real men either do something about it, or at the very least advocate others to, you know, open their mouth and say that we should actually do something about it, so that eventually we'll have enough people saying that we can actually do something about it in the real world. You know, like, real men don't sit around and bitch and moan about tyranny, whether misandric tyranny or inflation tyranny made possible by fiat currency. Like, silver bugs and gold bugs are idiots because they seem to know that money is power and that you should prevent yourself from being endlessly robbed by the government's dollar printing, that is, by inflation. But they don't seem to realize that you don't have real power if you can't live life the way you want to, and you can't live life the way you want to if the government has all kinds of laws preventing you from living the way you want to. Silver bugs and gold bugs seem to be incapable of realizing that that money is not the only power. Living in a community like Pastor Dowell, that is also power. That is just as much power as owning gold and silver is. And it's actually a much greater power in the sense that because it can also easily include saving in gold and silver as well. You know, those kind of guys also save in gold and silver. Pastor Dowell does. You know, he's held up a big giant silver bar before, as they used in the thumbnail for a video a few days ago, right? And he owns guns as well. He shows guns in his beginning of his videos or on the wall or whatever, you know, like he has guns as well. Real men are willing to exsanguinate other people, bad people, tyrannical people. It's really that simple. You know, real men are willing to exsanguinate evil people, people who are trying to oppress them. You know, men who don't want to, exsanguinate evil people who are trying to oppress them are not real men. It's that simple. This has been Redshift. Peace.